Yeah, I'm trying to work that out.
Oh, okay,
It's-
great. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you can just add another minute then,
Sure thing.
thank you.
Let me go run in the other room and take care of that real quick
Oh,
then.
okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, I added a minute,
Okay.
but for some reason the station stopped airing, so I'm gonna fix that real quick.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
But just a heads up, we should be starting around 6:08, I believe.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, we're back on the air. I'm gonna get Reverend Vicky Johnson up,
Thank
ready to
you
go.
so much. Perfect.
All right, Reverend Vicky Johnson should be there.
Okay. Pastor Johnson?
Good morning, Sandy. How are you?
Doing great, just as long as you know. Henry, I'm up.
Okay, perfect.
I'm
Pulling
on
up Facebook as we
so you
speak.
can check and make sure that she is. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I get a word from Pastor Johnson?
Okay. Pastor Johnson?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. It's great to be here, great to be alive. Another opportunity at life to get it right.
All right, perfect. Cool.
And we're going to do our best on today to get it right.
Get it right.
All right, I'm going to run into the other room and check the
Okay,
time
bless
before the
your
show real
heart.
quick. Should be about 3 minutes.
Sure. We're running between studios. These our people oftentimes have to do a lot of double and triple duty. That is also the nature of radio, Pastor Vicky. So there you have
Oh,
it.
yes.
Not always, but it is the nature of it. You know.
Right. And if anybody knows, you know.
Oh, well, you know, I've certainly learned some things. You know, plus what we do is we are always doing a whole lot with far less than people think that we have, you know.
3 minutes.
Thank you. But that's okay. You learn a lot,
Right.
you know. You learn a whole lot. Wrong. Mistake. Okay. Okay, got that. That. And we will be up, I'm assuming, in about a minute.
Yep.
Okay. Hey everybody, how you doing this morning? Hope that you're doing okay. More than okay. Hope you're doing great. Hey Angela, hey Dave. Good. I'm so thank you, Robert, for letting us know that we're loud and clear on all of these platforms. That is great.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
Stand by.
Okay, thank you.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of
1 second. It didn't fire for some reason.
gotta save the children we
Let me know when I come up.
We'll do.
Coming up in a hot second, you guys. Just hold on. There you go. We are on our way up, and that is more than a metaphor. So, okay.
We can change the world. Change the world.
Are we coming up?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay.
We can change the can change.
Okay, are we up? Yes, no?
All right, I think we're going to start without the opening.
Okay,
You
let me just count me in. Have me come in.
all right. You should be good.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Wednesday, May 17, 2023. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We're going to be talking about affirmative action. There's some really consequential cases before the court that could curtail or end rights or practices that have been in effect for 2 or 3 generations, really, since the 60s and the early 70s. And affirmative action impacts us in ways that many of us do not acknowledge. Indeed, the greatest recipients, the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are not Black people, they're not Indigenous people, they're not Asian people, it's white women. And yet the fiercest opponents of affirmative action are white women. Why is that so? It's kind of like Clarence Thomas, too. People who benefit from it want to end it. So let's talk about that today. And then, did you know, as much as we talk about democracy and fighting for that, we sold weapons to roughly 60% of the world's authoritarian nations. So we talk democracy, but our money goes someplace else. We're going to be talking with David Gibbs and Bryce Green about that. What does that say about our politics? So what does that really say about what we believe about democracy and freedom? What does it mean, everybody? In Chicago, it's going to be 57 degrees and clear today, a little cooler, and 75 degrees and clear up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. In the NBA, the Nuggets 132, the Lakers 126. So, of course, the Nuggets are leading that series by 1, but the series just started, everybody. Boston will be playing the Heat tonight, everybody. In Major League Baseball, the Twins 5, the Dodgers 1. They'll be playing, the Twins will be playing the Dodgers again today, this afternoon. The White Sox 8, the Guardians 3. Tonight, the Guardians will face off against the White Sox, and the Astros 7, the Cubs 3. And tonight, the Astros will be playing the Cubs once again. In the NHL, tomorrow night, the Panthers and the Hurricanes. Who's going to get that trophy? We don't know. We don't know, but we certainly are waiting. I just love to see that. Russia is launching larger aerial attacks at high-value locations in Ukraine from several directions at once, according to a U.S. official. One of the latest Russian strikes hit a U.S.-made Patriot air defense system in Kiev, according to Russia's defense ministry. A U.S. official said they were assessing the damage to the system, but denied that it had been destroyed. North Carolina's Republican-led General Assembly moved Tuesday to ban most abortions after 12 weeks, after being overstepped by GOP lawmakers. Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat, said he's energized to fight back on this and other critical issues. A New York State Supreme Court judge has granted a restraining order temporarily blocking New York City Mayor Eric Adams from sending more asylum seekers to nearby Orange County. This comes after Adams said last week that New York would bus willing migrants to hotels in nearby counties temporarily to ease the influx of people arriving in his city. Last night was a huge night in electoral politics. Indeed, the first African American who will be running for, who's the party nominee for the governorship of Kentucky, has won. He is a Trump-endorsed candidate, African American. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who came under fire for his handling of the Breonna Taylor case. So we'll see how that goes. Indeed, many politicos are touting this as the most widely watched. It will be the most widely watched contest in the season. And indeed, it's very interesting to note that over this past election season, more blacks ran under the Republican banner than have run under the Republican banner since the Civil War. Indeed, that was a party of black Americans during the Civil War because of the Republican stance on slavery. So there's so much to think about, so much to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. But right now we have got Pastor Vicki Johnson. She's got not one but two pulpits, and we can catch her twice on Sunday. Love it. How can we be with you on Sunday, Pastor Vicki Johnson?
Well, you can be with me at Lebanon Lutheran on 131st and Manistee in Hegewisch at 9 a.m. and at St. Thomas Lutheran on 80th and Jeffrey Boulevard at 11:30 a.m. for an hour of power. You can worship with us in person or on Facebook.
I love it. What is the good news? We need it. Oh, my gosh, we need it.
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. There is good news. In the 4th chapter of St. Mark, Jesus gets into a boat with his disciples and goes to sleep. A storm arises and the disciples react with fear, thinking they are going to die. Storms of life are normal, and at some point you may find yourself in a storm. Health challenge storms, relationship issue storms, financial challenge storms, housing storms, employment or the lack thereof storms, abuse storms, human rights storms. Storms are not unusual, but what are you doing in the storm? Jesus slept. Is it your storm, or have you placed yourself in someone else's storm? What are you saying to the storms in your life? Jesus spoke to what caused the storm and disturbance. He spoke to the winds and the waves. Reassess your storm. Identify what is causing it and speak to it. Speak the word for peace and expect peace. Peace for healing, peace for restoration, for comfort, for deliverance, peace for breakthrough and breakaway. Speak the word so that your storms can subside and you can go back to sleep. If you can do this, then to me, that's good news.
Amen, Pastor Vicki Johnson. He did sleep. I love it. I love it. I love it. Once again, how can we worship with you on Sunday and at what time?
Lebanon Lutheran, 13100 South Manistee in Hegewisch at 9 o'clock a.m. and St. Thomas Lutheran, 80th and Jeffrey Boulevard at 11:30 a.m. for an hour of power, both in person and on Facebook.
I know you wanted to say 8,000, but I'm glad. I was like, what? Okay. I'm not mad at you.
I know.
It's okay. These habits, it's just very hard. But it is 3 zeros. I know.
That's right.
Miss Hospital
That's right.
Corners, also known as Pastor Vicki Johnson, but that's all right. Oh, man, you and Aline, everything has to be just so.
Yeah.
It must be Dr. Lena McLean and Mabel Walker and all these women, these great women who helped to raise us, who were very exacting, and you needed to do it
That's right.
properly. And if you didn't do it properly, they were going to correct you and correct you and correct you and wrap you over your knuckles until you got it right. With love.
Until you got it right.
You better get
All
it right.
with love.
And
Yeah.
then corrected you into adulthood. Did I hear you put that preposition at the end? Love you, Pastor Vicki Johnson. Dwight's mother actually called me on the air like that. She said, subject, verb, were they in disagreement? What happened here? Because I said media are. I said, no, ma'am. I said I was using the media as a group, so not as an individual entity. She said, oh, okay. Auntie Lois loves you.
All right, Lois.
Okay.
Lois McKee.
Pinching those cheeks. Okay. So, love you, Pastor Vicki Johnson.
Love you, Santita.
Going straight down memory lane today. But, these are the people, they are the reason we are here. And we thank God for them every single day. We have got, of course, Dr. Shanina Knighton, infection preventionist, brilliant college lecturer, registered nurse, PhD, wife, mom, all of those things, daughter, sister, boom. If you call her at any point during the day, she is fulfilling all of those roles. It's unbelievable. Let me ask you this. I see a lot of commercials, and I comb your social media, and I'm always looking because I'm going to learn something. There are a lot of advertisements for hair loss, and it's interesting that hair loss is something, I don't know if it's a recent affliction with of women or what the deal is, but a lot of these commercials are targeted toward women because women are experiencing hair loss. And then, of course, there was the study that showed, even though some people disagree with it, that the relaxers are detrimental to Black women. And, to women, whoever's using a relaxer, can be detrimental to your hair. Talk to me, to your health and to your hair. What about hair loss? I mean, where does it come from? Is there anything you can do to prevent it, or can you regrow hair?
Santita, that actually lies, I would say, in the wheelhouse of dermatology.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to, let's say, hair loss as it relates to just health in general, for women, one of the major factors that is associated with it has been stress. It's also depending on certain populations, meaning let's say minority women, depending on the type of hairstyles that they do, which would be tension-causing hairstyles, may cause their, let's say, edges to break. There's also two hereditary things, meaning some women, alopecia actually does run through the family, or they have, let's say, inflammatory scalp issues. So there's a significant amount of things that actually can lead to someone losing their hair. And seeing a dermatologist would be of utmost importance because they'll be able to actually tell you what the scalp health, looks like. And that scalp health will be dependent upon whether or not your hair is in the best predicament to be able to grow.
So when you see hair loss, should you try to go see a dermatologist? What if you can't afford to see a dermatologist? Because so many of these specialties have to be a network when you have insurance, let alone when you don't have it.
That is the unfortunate part about it, is because I am unaware of, let's say, if free clinics and those resources do provide, let's say, dermatological support. I can imagine that they should, and the reason why is because you and I both know that when it comes to eczema, when it comes to, let's say, some sort of skin breakdown, that increases one's risk for infections. If you have any kind of open skin or any compromised skin, it puts you at risk for some sort of infection. So if it's not something that is covered let's say, up under some sort of free service or service, then that is something that honestly should be considered in legislation because of the outcomes associated with broken skin and the risk of someone coming in contact with germs that can contaminate that skin. And so I'm not aware of how that is approached in that regard. And as I mentioned, depending on what condition an individual has, that's dependent, that's going to depend, that's going to lead to whatever is the best treatment. So, for example, some people's reasons for why they have eczema flare-ups is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all model. I can tell you, I've mentioned this before, but there's certain food dyes, that we know are inside of foods that don't belong in foods but cause coloring of foods, such as, let's say, yellow sticks, that is known to be attached to skin irritation. And so while someone may say, oh, yellow sticks, that doesn't bother me, it's not something that'll always show up all the way. And so I always encourage people that if you are having some sort of inflammatory skin issue, that is your body telling you that something is wrong. And at that point, what can you be trying to cut out of your eating habits to say, okay, is this the root cause? And yes, I know that sometimes things are an equity issue in regards to what we have access to. But if you have, let's say, a rotation of foods, and one of these ingredients is, let's say, in one of the foods, trying to figure out how to decrease eating that food could be something that could be very helpful to your skin. And we know this because, remember, I don't know if you know back in the day how they used to say papa's attached to acne, right? And then they started doing the work to find out why it was attached to acne. It's the same exact thing, meaning we have to understand what are we putting in our bodies, what are we around. Sometimes it can be environmental, meaning that if the air is too thick and it's contaminated, that's also caused outbreaks. And so it's just really an awareness of what's going on with our skin. And if we cannot make it to some sort of healthcare provider, us trying to do investigative things, meaning being the CEO of our own health and understanding, if I cut this thing out today or for a week, let's see how my body does. If I try eliminating this, let's see how my body does. So it's really playing a process of elimination to understand how do you best correct some things in your health.
What foods are good for hair? I mean, is there any food that is good for hair? And can you look at your nails and nails and hair and say, is there a connection?
Nutrient-dense foods, and we have to remember that our nails are still a part of our skin and is still considered a part of the organ. We may not think that it's alive, but it is. And so the same way that we would take care of, let's say, our skin is directly correlated with our nails, is directly correlated with our hair. Vitamin E is heavily attached to that. Dr. Deb used to talk about it all the time, about that being our nutrient-dense foods. Nutrient-dense foods meaning foods that do not have some sort of calorie count on it. You're not going to find an expiration date. It's just items that you know will be fresh that you will find inside of, let's say, a grocery store. You might find at a local farmer's market. You may find somewhere where fresh produce is. Those would be the foods that you would want to consume more of in your body. That would be helpful to your hair and your nails. Another thing as well, Santita, and I'm just going to touch on this for 1 minute, is the fact that hair loss is a real thing after COVID. And ladies have noticed significant hair loss after COVID, and there's something that is not being discussed as often, but there has been a real thing of women losing their hair directly after COVID for that 3 to 6 months afterwards. And it's crazy, almost like the shedding of hair that would happen after having a baby if you're not taking vitamins and being careful. And so really just understanding, what can you do to offset what potentially may happen.
Dr. Shanita Knighton, I'm watching all of these commercials on television, and you're right, post-COVID, I've heard a good many people I know who've had COVID talk about hair loss. And I wondered, is there anything you can do? Is there anything you can do? And, I think we need to have those conversations too. Of course, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Hey, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina, sending you so much love today. Let's talk about the fact that America sells most weapons to autocracies. Well, not to democracies. Now, one would think with all that we say about democracy that we would certainly want to support them and only sell weapons to them. No, that's not true. In fact, we supply dictators. That's what we do. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Okay, I think you might be gone now. All the situations then, it comes down to the guns. Okay,
We're
Henry?
not allowed to push back and say we want legislation
1 second, sorry, I have to get bright screen.
Okay,
rifles
no worries.
because that's an infringement. But it is not apparently an infringement to have children slaughtered in their classrooms. That is what every single guns without any sort of legislation lobbyist and proponent needs to be saying right now. The loss of life is worth being able to have whatever gun I want. It just that's it. That's what you were demanding of all of us. That's what we've become as a country that fetishizes guns above all else, because it's a Second Amendment. It absolutely is astounding. There's no forward here. They will not give up any ground.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter. In 2023, WCPT 820 is where facts matter.
Information is power.
In-depth analysis. Thought.
Hi, yeah, what's up, Ms. Jackson?
Stay informed to know what's going on.
Are demanding that their voices be heard.
Oh, yeah, I accidentally put that on there, sorry.
No worries, and during the break, if you could bring down the radio,
where
because
facts
people like to hear the
matter.
crosstalk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Better?
Oh, yeah, but let me hear some of it, because I need to make sure that we're still on the air. When I don't hear
Can you hear that?
anything, no.
Just Jennifer.
How about that?
Now I can
Mostly
hear
sunny
it.
skies
Just
here
bring it
for
down a little
Right.
bit more.
high in the
A little bit more.
mid-60s.
Unfortunately,
That's it.
Miles per hour.
perfect.
Gusting as high as
No,
20.
that was too loud.
Tonight, partly cloudy alone.
okay. That I can't adjust that volume on this pod, unfortunately.
No. If you
Chance for showers and thunderstorms, cloudy high of
just where you had it
72.
was
Saturday,
good.
plenty of blue sky,
Better?
sun, and we'll see high around
A
69
little better.
degrees.
Yeah, I just need to be
That's
able to
your
do
latest
crosstalk
Chicago
with my.
weather update.
Hey, Joseph.
Currently, it's 47.
Ziegler, how you
How do you
doing,
know if
sweetie?
your sump pumps are working?
I just need to be
More
able to talk
importantly,
with my.
how do you know if they're not?
Talk with people
At
during the
Permaseal,
break.
we know the only way
It's
to
too
ensure
loud
your pumps
right
are in
now.
working order is to test.
Okay.
Better?
Yes.
I
Only
have
problem.
David Gibbs. I was
Okay.
not able to get Robert Green. I'm trying to call. He's not answering right now, but just a heads up, still trying.
Oh, Bryce Green?
Yes,
Okay, no, just go on and continue to try.
we'll do.
Okay,
We have about
thank
a minute
you.
and a half. Just heads up.
Dr. Gibbs, how are you?
Good morning, Santita. I'm fine.
Oh, wonderful hearing your voice always.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
So we can talk about things that no one else talks about.
That's right.
Commercial radio.
Yeah, it's always unusual in that respect, yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh boy. Well, that's all right. I'm good with that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm good, but thank you so much for your support and for all that you do, because it really means so much. Please, because at least there's someone I can call.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Not very many voices out there, yeah.
No, there aren't. Oh boy, it's hilarious. But I'm so accustomed to it. I was telling my father, I said, I'm your eldest. Jesse, Johnny, and I were born like within 2.5 years of each other. And, I said, we grew up with you when you were most controversial. Not that my baby brother and baby sister didn't, but it was, it was just a little different. I said, you said I was an infant when we went by,
We're going to be back in 15 seconds.
Thank you. Fred Hampton's apartment. And he left me outside, but I was standing there, and you saw the bullets everywhere.
Wow.
boy.
Remember that.
Stand by.
Yeah.
Wasn't able to get Bryce, unfortunately.
I'm going to just keep trying him, okay?
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
You trying to get Bryce Green? Is that it?
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Hey, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. WCPT is my home station, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Sending you all so much love in Minneapolis, St. Paul today. Let's talk about what we really stand for. It turns out the United States sold weapons to roughly 60% of the world's authoritarian nations. This emanates from a ProPublica report that comes from a new analysis by the Security Policy Reform Institute. And they said, the Biden administration is selling weapons to the majority of the world's autocracies. Now, I was just reading a wonderful op-ed piece by someone for whom I have so much respect, the former Secretary of Labor during the Clinton administration, Dr. Robert Reich. And he was saying, look, authoritarianism is something that we have to be vigilant against. It is now democracy versus authoritarianism. There can be no compromise. A wonderful op-ed piece in Common Dreams. And yet, we are selling weapons to the majority of the world's autocracies. So what does that say? I mean, there's a disconnect, I do believe, between our rhetoric and what it is that we do. We're quick to call people socialist and communist in the United States, and yet our bankers are the communists, the Chinese, and our best friends are socialists, the British. We say that we love democracy, yes, and yet we struggle to establish one here. We're still struggling to do that, everybody. The Founding Fathers, make no mistake, they didn't fully trust democracy at all. So they set up a constitutional republic, and they put democratic elements in it. But they were they were in a fight with the monarchies, and the oligarchs and the monarchs were having a fight, and they were not thinking about anybody else. So just think about that. It's just like the billionaires and the royalty today. Think about it that way. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about what it means when we see that since President Biden, according to this Intercept article, since he came into office in 2021, he has talked about a battle between democracies and autocracies in which the U.S. and other democracies strive to create a peaceful world. But the reality, according to this report from Intercept, is that the Biden administration has helped increase the military power of a large number of authoritarian countries. What do you think about that? 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Dr. David Gibbs, historian from the University of Arizona. Talk to me. It seems a little contradictory. What is this report telling us?
Well, I think the main consideration here is commercial and profit-making, and that selling arms is a very lucrative business, enhancing major elements of the private sector that have intimate connections with the foreign policy establishment and with the Biden administration, with all administrations, really. And if you're manufacturing weapons for the U.S. military, you also want to sell them abroad. It increases your profit margins. And the United States government has long, throughout the period post-1945, promoted overseas arms sales with political objectives, but again, with to a significant degree, I think, commercial objectives, enhancing profitability. And there is, of course, a certain rhetorical style that emphasizes democracy and human rights, but one really shouldn't take it too seriously, I think, given the evidence that was in the Intercept article, that the United States sells many autocracies weapons. And the whole idea of selling weapons for profit is itself a morally problematic one by any reasonable standard. It is enormous diversion of money to more valuable activities that improve people's lives, and it increases insecurity. It also concentrates wealth in the hands of In this case, weapons manufacturers and people who own stock in weapons manufacturers. So on the whole, there's really very little that can be positive that can be said about these kinds of arms sales.
And we see a revolving door between the highest, the people, the generals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star generals. There's like a revolving door between them as they top out in the Pentagon, in the military, and they go right into the military-industrial complex. They literally go into the arms industry. And then we see them on television, and we don't see we don't see Medea Benjamin, we don't see Norman Solomon, we don't see, peace activists, Code Pink. We don't see, explain that to me, because, they're one, and then no one really wants to talk about the fact that it has been the United States that has discouraged Ukraine, I think to their detriment, to pursue a path to peace.
Well, one of the things that you touch on, which is also very important to note, is the military-industrial complex. I should add also the CIA has long had intimate connections with the media. And this goes all the way back to the early parts of the Cold War, very clearly to the present day. You turn on CNN or MSNBC, and you see a lot of retired military, especially a lot of retired CIA and intelligence personnel. And they're always presented as if these are unbiased, unblemished personalities, whereas obviously they represent powerful vested interests. In academia, where I come from, the military and the CIA have intimate connections with every aspect of academia, including political science, where I got my PhD. This has been a major source of funding for the social sciences and, of course, for the hard sciences. And so this gives them an enormous amount of influence. And one more thing, of course, Hollywood. The military, I assume also the CIA has a lot of influence in writing scripts for entertainment that we watch on Netflix and things like that. And so this is a kind of an informal method of lobbying for precisely the people, who benefit and profit from these kinds of overseas arms sales. And so it's a very, comfortable kind of network, a massive network, but it benefits only a very small number of people, largely to the detriment of everyone else, as far as I can tell.
And it's clear that they shape the culture. And because we're seeing them,
very definitely.
They shape the news, right? And then even in Black Panther, I loved the movie. I thought it was great. It was a great breakthrough moment. But what was interesting to me, a little confusing, the Black Power character was the villain. And the African king, who was partnered with an American CIA agent, and they were the heroes. And I loved Wakanda forever, but that just, it left me feeling not confused, but I had mixed feelings. Culturally, I said, this is great. But the political culture, I said, this is dangerous, I think. Particularly when you know the role that the U.S. intelligence community has had in overthrowing democratically elected governments all around the world, particularly the freedom movements in South Africa and throughout the African continent, and the Indian continent, the Asians, Southeast Asia, just everywhere.
Yeah. Well, my first book actually was on the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the CIA's role in assassinating Patrice Lumumba. Who was democratically elected. People tend to forget that full detail. And so, yes, there's a long history of this. And, you could look at basically Black Panther as an effort to at least insert a certain amount of whitewash into that history.
Well, so whom do we trust? Because we hear so much about democracy, and that's what we should be fighting for. And then we find that we're really in league with the dictators. With those who are not democratic. That's what this report is telling us. Yes?
It definitely. Basically there's a complete sort of massive deception here in terms of, if you listen to people like Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, you get a lot of very moralistic rhetoric about democracy and human rights, rules-based order, and this type of thing. If you listen to the mainstream media, the New York Times, NPR, you pretty much get the same thing. It's virtually identical. It's really what the State Department is saying. But then you see a report here that the United States is doing exactly the opposite of what it claims to be doing. That shouldn't come as a big surprise when you think about it in any depth. But if you just look at the surface reporting, one gets the impression the United States is this pristine moral country. and one forgets about these very sordid arms sales, and also things like the U.S. illegal invasion of Iraq, which was catastrophic, the 20-year intervention in Afghanistan, the overthrow and death of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. There's a whole series of United States warlike illegal actions overseas involving massive violence, which you really don't read about very much, or at least not as much as you should. And it does reflect not just a bias, but a sort of systemic bias in the reporting system that's interlinked with the very people who are undertaking these actions, the military-industrial complex and the intelligence services.
I'm wondering how this impacts our men and women who are overseas. If once they leave the base or leave the place of encampment, if they feel some of the blowback because they're seen as occupiers.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt if you look at the history of Al-Qaeda, that's exactly what happened with Al-Qaeda. Basically, that these were people, beginning with bin Laden, who had worked with the Central Intelligence Agencies very closely in Afghanistan, who were to some extent armed and trained and supported by the U.S. intelligence services and to some extent the military in Afghanistan. And then they turned against us with disastrous consequences, as we all know, the war on terror. And one of the reasons for that is the massive U.S. presence in the Middle East, particularly in Saudi Arabia, which they found offensive to them, the Al-Qaeda nationalists, partly on religious and partly on nationalistic grounds. And this produced, again, it's very striking how, the U.S. overseas presence is often presented as defensive and aimed at security. And in reality, it's exactly the opposite. It's offensive and it generates insecurity. I think the war on terror clearly showed that. And, these overseas arms sales almost invariably are destabilizing. Countries we sell them these arms to often turn against us, and they're used against us. In the case of Al-Qaeda, that certainly happened, and the United States was training these people, giving them arms, and then these things were used against us.
What does it say that Cuba, which once was the least literate nation in the hemisphere, and I think of Cuba often because my grandmother was a migrant worker there. She was from Florida, but there was, and my mother's mother. And she grew up in absolute poverty in South Florida. And in South Florida was a swamp before Disneyland or Disney World. And it was vastly underdeveloped territory in the United States. And so during slavery, African Americans were able to escape there. And that's part of her lineage. And then they were able to move into the Osceola Indian tribes and all of that. And so, or should I say indigenous tribes, indigenous nations. And so I'm struck by the fact that she would get on the boat seasonally and sometimes daily or weekly to go chop sugarcane in Cuba and throughout the Caribbean and in South and Central America. And then she would, pick beans. So my brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, would take her to the store because she ended up moving to our parents' home in Washington. And he has a wonderful video of her going through the vegetables at Whole Foods. She used to go once a week. She loved it. And she would tell you the beans, this is how you find the right beans. And it would take her about an hour to get a couple of good bags of beans. She was very serious about that because she had done that kind of work. And she said, you can say a lot of things about Castro, and she wouldn't say much. And she was also a deeply conservative woman, as many Black people are, socially very, 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 very conservative. She said, you would say what you will about Castro. She said, but when I was a child, we were little more than slaves there. Because also, my grandmother's phenotype, unlike my father's people, she was very, very dark. She looked West African. And so she was all the way at the bottom of the social order. And I look at what has happened in Cuba, even with our sanctions, even, they're like the top exporters of doctors around the world. I mean, if you need a doctor, literally there's one on every block in Cuba. And when there are doctors that are needed any place in the world, they just ship them out. But we're the biggest weapons dealers. I know that was a lengthy preamble, but I'm just looking at the values, Dr. Gibbs.
Yeah. Well, I think that you can look at the U.S. relationship with Cuba, and note that basically it's been an extremely cruel one from the standpoint of the United States, in that Cuba is not a perfect country, something it shares with everybody else in the world, but it certainly has its accomplishments. You've noted some of them, and the accomplishments have indeed been impressive. And the turn to communism has in fact improved the lives of most people on the island, despite despite the U.S. sanctions. And the United States' effort has been one of unrelenting, not just hostility, but an effort to make people in Cuba miserable, a policy that continues to the present day. And the United States has sanctions all over the world with devastating consequences. And people often, I think, underestimate really how cruel these sanctions really are. Madeleine Albright in the 90s famously admitted that 500,000 children had died in Iraq thanks to U.S. sanctions against Saddam Hussein.
And she didn't have a problem with it, right?
That's right. That's right. Now, she said, we think the price is worth it. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And, this really raises the question. Let me just put it this way. When one hears U.S. officials talk about the rules-based order in America as kind of a beacon of morality, it's very difficult for me to keep a straight face when I hear things like that. And I compare it to what the U.S. is doing in places like Cuba or what the U.S. did in Iraq in the 1990s. The United States it can be a very cruel country, I'm sorry to say, in its foreign policy. And arms sales is only one aspect of that. Another is sanctions. Another is use of military force in very brazen and open ways. Another is covert operations. The United States is, anybody who thinks the United States has been this sort of moral beacon in the world is simply not dealing with reality.
Well, and you say this, why? Because when you say this, you have some people who say, America like it, love it or leave it. And please, I've been here for hundreds of years, so I'm not going anywhere. And I think that's very immature, because if, your parents love you and they give you critique, I can't leave my mother without her finding something that was a little off, and she's going to, if she doesn't catch it while I'm in her presence, she'll call me when I get home. Saw this, and you said such and such, and, I don't know if you should, I think when you love people, you criticize them. And I'm just wondering, in this environment where a lot of the great attacks are coming from the left now. Donald Trump says last week, look, when you had a reporter, and I felt this was wholly inappropriate, what side are you on? Who do you want to win? A war? Are you serious right now? We want to end war. And he says, I don't want any more killing. That's what I want to do. And he gets attacked for that. I'm like, look, I agree with that. A broken clock is right twice a day. I mean, what? And then I find out that we're talking about democracy, Dr. Gibbs. And we don't care about that.
Well, you've definitely had, with regard to what you're saying about Trump, we are seeing some kind of a very strange realignment going on in the country. We have a situation that, a leading Republican figure, in this case one with, let's face it, does have an unsavory record in many respects, Donald Trump. Nevertheless, he has been saying reasonable things about Ukraine, much more reasonable, in my view, than anything coming out of the Biden administration. And one can question what his motive is. One can question whether he really means it or not. That's all legitimate. But at the end of the day, if you look at what he's saying, as you noted, some of it is perfectly reasonable. And it's quite striking that it is more from the Republican Party at the present time that we're seeing reasoned criticisms of U.S. intervention in Ukraine than we are from either the Democrats or from the activist left. And that's a striking change in American politics, one that I don't think people have fully come to terms with. I think for all the culture wars and the partisan animosity, politics has become much more confused at a substantive level, especially with regard to foreign policy, where the old lines of right and left don't really mean what they used to mean.
Well, and it's interesting, you're seeing some kind of alignment between the right and the left on, I would say the far right and the far left on war, certainly on Ukraine.
Yes.
And on some other issues. And I'm wondering what's, like you said, the realignment, what that means.
Yeah. I think, it's so much in progress. It's such a work in progress. It's happening so quickly before our eyes. It'll be a while before this thing shakes out enough that we can really get a handle on what's happening here. But the fact that it's happening is very clear and very striking to me. And it's, like I said, mostly in foreign policy. You're seeing on other things too. Even in economics, you're getting that's the populist style, but a strongly populist style coming from the right that is often on economic issues, addressing issues like economic inequality, greed of corporations, the plight of the working classes in America. Tucker Carlson is, he's a problematic figure, and we all know he said problematic things, and, I don't want to defend him here, but it is a fact. If you listen to what he says, he does reflect this populist style in economics, as well, I should say, on anti-war issues. And
a lot of issues.
That's true.
A lot of them. I can have problems with him. He's someone, to fully disclose, I've been at Fox News. He's someone who I've met on several occasions. Very pleasant guy. Do I agree with his politics 100%? No. But do I agree with a lot of what he is? At least that when he had his show on Fox, he opened the door for us to hear from people and to hear different sides. His was the only corporate media show where I could hear someone talk about peace in Ukraine. What's wrong with that?
It is also true. It is also true that basically he did staunchly defend, just before he left the show, in fact, this sort of, radical black sort of Marxist group that was being persecuted by the, Justice Department for its stance on the Ukraine war. I think it was in Philadelphia. That's right, and it was I think it was called the Uhuru Group. I don't know very much about them, but he was staunchly defending them.
Because the FBI raided this 82-year-old man's house and called him a Russian disinformation agent. No,
the whole thing seemed incredibly unpleasant and disturbing, and it received remarkably little attention in the press. And on Fox News, that's the only place you could really hear about it, into anything like the mainstream. And to me, that again suggests something is shaking up in American politics. It's not the way it was before. It's not the politics you and I grew up with in terms of left and right. You're going to see, I think, someone like Robert Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy running for president. He's going to get support from sort of both sides of the aisle, I suspect, in ways that, again, are going to be very ideologically confusing. I think it'll be very difficult and very disturbing for sort of the political mainstream.
Well, honestly, it doesn't disturb me. And indeed, Roger Stone said that was something that Donald Trump was primed to do. He said, but, you had Bernie Sanders, who had overtaken the populist progressive vote, and you had Hillary, who had the women and the mainstream Democrats. He said, so you went for the low-hanging fruit. He said, and I wish he had not, because he could have completely changed the system, because he's more of a transactional figure. Yeah. The thing is, I really try to be scientific in my analysis, if you will, of politics. I took emotion out of it, Dr. Gibbs, a long time ago. I realized that, it's not personal. It is what it is. So in this last minute, what is our takeaway from the United States selling all of these weapons to all of these people who are ideologically opposed to us? We invade countries that are autocratic.
Well, I think one has to be much more skeptical than people are of the mainstream media with regard to the reporting on these types of issues. And I think people, when they start seeing former generals and particularly former CIA officers, former intelligence officers being presented as sort of completely objective analysts, I think people need to be very skeptical of that, because these are interested parties representing agencies with a history of, let us be frank here, a history of lying to the public. And, reasonably, based on reasonable rules of evidence, people should, frankly, not take very much they say seriously. And they should be much more skeptical, I think, of the reporting on the Ukraine war that focuses so much upon what the U.S. government claims is going on in Ukraine, what the British government claims is going on in Ukraine, and realize, again, these are not unbiased parties. These are biased parties. I think people need to start thinking for themselves more on this war and start thinking for themselves in general, and get away from basically the sort of lockstep agreement with what the mainstream media is telling people about these things.
About these things and about anyone. That's why I'll be talking with Marianne Williamson next week I'm starting to work on getting Robert Kennedy, and of course I want President Biden, and quite frankly, I would speak to Republicans too. I want to hear what people have to say, and I think you need to hear what they have to say too. Because even if you don't get who you want, Dr. Gibbs, you need to get what you need. That's politics. It's politics, you know, and I think that even when you get who you want, you got to challenge them so you can ensure that they get you what you need. So blessings to you, and thank you for really helping us to get through this, because I tell you, when I saw this article and, you know, and the study and all of that, I said, here we go. But I'm so glad that it happened, and I'm so glad that you're you. So there we go. All these people calling me. What? Wait a minute. Why I'm on the air. Unbelievable. Sending you so much love. God bless you. Dr. David Gibbs, everybody, from the University of Arizona. Let's talk about affirmative action and what it really, really means. It could go out the window. And the fiercest opponents, it seems, are white women, and they're the greatest beneficiaries of it. You can't make this stuff up. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, everybody, how you doing?
Good morning.
Hi. Hi, is this Aaron? Or is this Melody?
Melody.
Melody, hey, girl, yeah, I was about to send you a text. I was on the air. So I couldn't answer the phone.
No worries. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you? I'm sorry. I'm trying to chase down a couple of things here. I am doing well. Thank you so much. Give me one moment. Oh, boy. Just give me a moment. Oh, boy. Let me see. What am I doing here?
Hi, Miss Jackson.
Yes.
We have Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Dwight McKee, Melody Cerna, Attorney Aaron Connolly, and Attorney Mark Fancher.
Fantastic. Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone? Let me Attorney Fancher.
Good morning.
Good morning. Doing a mic check. Attorney Hoffler.
Good morning.
Hey, Melody Cerna. How are you?
Good morning.
Attorney Connolly.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's wonderful to have everybody here. Did I miss anyone? Trying to do a couple of things at once right now.
Me.
Dwight McKee. Okay, didn't know that you were there. Hey, good. So glad that you all are all with us today. CK, I'm about to send you something right now.
Okay.
Your flight's at 10?
It is, and I'll be. But don't worry about that. I'll be at that's the Rainbow offices. So I will be until I go into my Uber, and I'll just continue from there.
Okay. I'm going to call you after. I'm going to call you after this.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, everyone, you all can please, amongst yourselves. Okay, CK, look, you have a list of who's here.
Okay. I'll look at it.
I don't think you've met Miss Cerna. Melody, she is new to this panel, and I'm so glad that she's here. She was with me yesterday, and she gave a
morning.
wonderful speech at the inauguration for our new mayor. She is the executive director of the American Indian Center of Chicago.
Good morning and welcome.
And this is the chairman of the board of Rainbow Push. So I'm really glad that you're getting a chance to see her and to speak to her. Melody Cerna,
Yes,
Attorney
ma'am.
C.K. Hoffler, Melody Cerna.
Good morning and great to meet you.
Good morning. It's nice to meet you.
Okay, everybody, talk amongst yourselves. I am looking at a couple of other things right now. Thank you. You know, I'm trying to get some things done here. Okay. Well, please don't all speak at once. Goodness gracious. Hello? Y'all, goodness gracious. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Okay. Melody, how are you this morning?
I'm well. Thank you so much for asking.
Great. CK, you got what I sent you?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
okay, great. I'll start things off. And then we'll keep on going. Hold on, please. How much time do we have here?
2.5 minutes.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, you guys, thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to go into this live read that I'm going to need you to send me the copy of, okay?
Will do.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, you guys. This is great. Thought so. Okay, all right. You all got me talking to myself here.
Mm-hmm. 1 minute.
Okay, all right. Okay, you guys, let's get right to it.
Back in 30.
Okay, thank you.
Stand by.
Okay, here we go. Let's get right to
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children.
everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about affirmative action. It could be ended, not mended, but ended. Indeed, remember, this was a conservative remedy to help rectify generations, hundreds of years of discrimination, of exclusion of black people. And it ended up, as you looked at affirmative action, it ended up helping everybody. None more so than white women. And yet the fiercest critics of affirmative action among them are really in the front of the line are white women. So what is the deal with that? What is the deal? Let's talk about that. And what will America look like if affirmative action is gutted? They could leave it in place like they left the Voting Rights Act in place, but it's been gutted. It's been gutted. So what would that mean? Government contracts, at school admissions, at the grammar school, high school, and college level, graduate school, what would that mean? Particularly as we're having studies that show that the health outcomes, for example, of black and indigenous people and Hispanic people are significantly heightened when you have a black, brown, or indigenous doctor. So, little things, all these little bricks that build a building. So let's get right to it, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 57 degrees. It will be clear. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 75 degrees, clear. In the NBA, 132, the Lakers 126. The Nuggets, of course, after one game, lead that series. And Boston will be playing the Heat tonight. Who is going to be triumphant? We do not know yet. Who's going to play in that Stanley Cup final? We don't know, but the Panthers and the Hurricanes will be facing off tomorrow, everybody. In Major League Baseball, the Twins 5, the Dodgers 1. The White Sox 8, the Guardians 3, and the Astros 7, and the Cubs 3, everybody. In some of the headlines, we have had some history made, everybody. A Trump-backed candidate, the Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, emerged from a messy, contentious, crowded primary to become the man who will be facing off Governor Andy Beshear, Democrat. Very popular is he throughout the state, even though the Democratic Party is not quite as popular. But Daniel Cameron, African-American, the first African-American to get the nomination of his party or to run for governor in that state. Well, what's going to happen there? We do not know. Everybody said that this is the race to watch. And indeed, Trump jumped in very early, gave him a lift, and here you go. In the fall, everybody. Russia is launching larger aerial attacks at high-value locations in Ukraine from several locations all at once, according to the United States. North Carolina's Republican-led General Assembly moved Tuesday to ban most abortions after 12 weeks, overriding a previous veto from the governor on the message. A New York State Supreme Court judge has granted a restraining order temporarily blocking New York City Mayor Eric Adams from sending more asylum seekers to nearby Orange County, just outside of New York City. This comes after Adams said last week that New York would bus willing migrants to hotels in nearby counties temporarily to ease the influx of people arriving in his city. Indeed, in Chicago, remember, just before she left, you had, I can hear you, CK. Okay. And just everyone, wait a minute, CK, I can hear you. Wait a minute, let's put her on mute. Okay, so I can get through these headlines, everybody. The Department of Homeland Security has directed its agencies to review and assess who has access to classified information by the end of June, according to an internal memo obtained by CNN, a move that comes on the heels of a leak of a highly classified Pentagon set of documents discovered earlier this year. Those are just some of the headlines. We are so excited to welcome to the show one of our new sponsors, Meggitt Financial. You do not have to have high net worth to get a financial advisor. Indeed, you can be middle class, you can be working class, you can even be poor. You need to have access to people who understand financial literacy. Most of us shun the idea, perish the thought, but you really shouldn't, everybody. You've been hearing me talk about them, and Ron Whittingham is going to be on this show in a few days to talk to you about how you can get in touch with them so that you can help to plot your financial future on into a comfortable retirement. Call them at 708-444-1090, 708-444-1090. You are not, no bank is too big to fail, and no person is too small to save. Indeed, that is what they believe, everybody. Meggitt Financial, they have built their business on helping middle class and working class people, union people, who have regular incomes, but they're looking to help people who work in the big box stores, who work in fast food restaurants, they said, yeah, you need a financial advisor too, someone who can help you to manage your paycheck so that you can plan for retirement and figure your way through this really tough financial situation that we find ourselves living in now. And so I want you to reach out to Megan Financial because I think that they can help you at 708-444-1090, 708-444-1090, and you can go to meganfinancial.com, MEGENT, financial.com, meganfinancial.com. And of course, no, even in this difficult environment, and this is an environment in which people do not want to buy houses, not Americans, which is very unusual because that's the cornerstone of our wealth. Well, if you are a first-time home buyer, you need to reach out to Team Hochberg. And a first-time home buyer, according to their definition, it's a national definition actually. You cannot have owned a home within the past 3 years, So call Team Hochberg. You might qualify for some amazingly low mortgage rates right now. First-time home buyers made up just 26% of the marketplace last year, down from 34% the year before, and numbers much higher in previous years. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac they've taken notice of that, and they said we've got to turn this around because we do need America to be populated by homeowners. So they're incentivizing first-time home buyers, people who have not owned a home in the past 3 years with substantially lower mortgage rates, everybody. And so if you live in Chicago and your total household income is under $105,700, you might qualify for these lower rates, everybody, if you've not owned a home within the past 3 years. Call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, 56david.com, and get some information. Hey, go to the website, find out what the program is about. But you know what? I would call them and let them know, just unburden yourself to them, and they can really guide you through this process. I think it could help you, everybody. I'm going to have David Hochberg on here real soon so you can ask him questions yourself about buying a home in this environment. Yes, you can still do that, and you should. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and get into your home ownership. Everybody, have a lot of appreciation for Simone Sanders and her show on MSNBC and the work that she's been doing over the past few years. Met her when she was with Bernie Sanders. That having been said, she sounded an alarm on her show about these cases that are coming before the Supreme Court that are, CK, and of course, this legal Q&A with that could really undo affirmative action among other cases. So I want to know what about 773-763-9278. CK, she said this is not hyperbole. She warns that these decisions that are before the court could make Black history illegal and refusing to serve Black people legal if you take these cases to their logical conclusions. And it's not just Black people, everybody. It's, it will be a completely subjective process. And so what do you think about that? And why is it that the fiercest opponents of affirmative action are those who've benefited the most from it, like Clarence Thomas, like white women generally? The fiercest opponents of affirmative action are those who've benefited the most. And the people who've benefited the most from affirmative action, as you well know, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, it's not Black people. It's not Indigenous people. It's not Latino people. It is white women. So I want you to call
Absolutely.
me. Call CK, because she's the lawyer, and we've got a tremendous panel. Dwight McKee, social scientist. We've got Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant attorney, to talk about this, and of course, Attorney Aaron Connolly. So glad that you're here with us today. And we have got, we have someone new to the show, Sister Beloved. Indeed, she gave a brilliant speech. She was representing an indigenous constituency here in Chicago. Of course, this was and is still indigenous land. And of course, Melody Cerner was with us yesterday. She's the executive director of the American Indian Center of Chicago. But CK, I want Melody to really become part of these panels, because these are issues that impact us all. I don't want her just to answer
Absolutely.
questions about indigenous people. You know, I don't want Aaron just to talk about white women. I don't want us to just talk about black people.
Right.
We need to talk about everything all the time. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, whew, affirmative
Well, good
action
morning,
could go
Santita.
out the window. What would that mean?
It would mean madness. And it would mean, I mean, we're going through such a transformation in this country now. We've talked about how divided we are as a country. But if affirmative action goes out the window, and that's just a broad statement, the world as we know it, as people, it's just not black and brown, it will affect every fiber of our society. And let me just say this. Santita, we on this show, on all of your shows, but especially when we're talking about legal issues, we are not interested in people speaking from a certain, just because they're part of a certain ethnicity or cultural background. We want to delve into the issues because it impacts all of us. And so what I love about your show, Santita, is that you bring out the best. You encourage people to speak their truth, and that's what we want. Absolutely, we welcome Melody to this panel whenever she's available, whenever she would like to come on and speak, because we want to delve into these issues and ensure that all voices are heard. Affirmative action. Well, we got it. And you know, Santita, we got to set the table this way. The U.S. Supreme Court today, we've discussed on these shows the distrust, the lack of trust that Americans have about the U.S. Supreme Court for many reasons. Based on
CK?
Need to start.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you went out. Mm-hmm.
We only need to. Oh, I'm sorry. We only need to start with the reversal of Roe versus Wade, the repealing of Roe versus Wade. And while that opinion was leaked, it was leaked. And even though that was the case, at the time when it was leaked, many people were duped about what the real issues were. So we had the faith community taking one position, thinking, well, this was, you know, the preserving of a life and all of that. And then your women's advocacy groups taking another position. And some people fell in the middle. But what we are seeing today is a reversal of some of the faith community leaders saying we did not realize the true ramifications of that reversal, because what they're seeing is the members of their congregation, the women, some women whose lives are in jeopardy because they cannot get appropriate medical procedures when they have a miscarriage in certain states. That is so dangerous. And many of these women don't have the funds to fly into or drive to or take a bus or be part of some organized system into a state that would allow them to get the appropriate medical procedure when their lives are in jeopardy. That's just one little tiny example, and there are thousands and thousands of them. So this Supreme Court is bold enough to reverse precedent. The fact that we have race-based affirmative action programs that this U.S. Supreme Court has sanctioned, I mean, that's a law of the land, and race can be considered as a factor. We've talked about this misnomer, this red herring, where people believe if you have benefited from affirmative action, that you were not qualified. That would be negative. For those of us, and that would be almost everyone, everyone except for perhaps white males, who have benefited from affirmative action programs, you are amongst the qualified candidates. So apples to apples, you have a qualified candidate who is African American or is indigenous, and you have a qualified candidate who is white. Race can be considered a factor in the determination. We're not going from a position of you're not qualified. We're from a position you are qualified. That's where it's all misleading. But
unlike legacies, right? I mean, legacies.
Like legacies where you just go on in because you're a legacy. And so we're not, your grades can be jacked up. I mean, nothing, say what you will about President Bush, the second President Bush, but he was a legacy.
And that's what he said. He said that at the graduation. He said, I don't know how I got in here.
And he spoke truth because he really didn't know. And if his last name weren't Bush and if he weren't legacy, he wouldn't have gotten in. But I do want, perhaps he wouldn't have gotten in. He doesn't believe he wouldn't have gotten in. So
he knows.
I think we have to situate this. He knows. We have to really, really remember that the group, and you said this in your introduction, that has benefited the most are white women from affirmative action programs. And so it's not just a question of, diversifying. It's not just a question of giving others opportunity. If those programs go out the window, if this U.S. Supreme Court reverses through the cases that it has in the pipe, reverses affirmative action programs or says that race cannot be considered a factor, that is going to change the fabric of what we see in terms of government contracting, medical services, admissions at universities, admissions in graduate school programs, all of that, every aspect, government contracts, whether it's on a state, local, municipal level, everything that we touch, believe it or not, has within it, embedded in it, some part of affirmative action. And it is called, and let's not talk about voting rights, civil rights. We have seen how in Shelby County versus Holder, the Voting Rights Act was basically gutted in a major way, and that many tie the voter suppression that we experience today to that. There will be more voter suppression because what will happen is there will be more power vested in the states to do whatever they want to do without regard to affirmative action. This is serious. The ramifications are very significant. And so when that happens, people will not realize the full impact until it's done, until the Supreme Court rules that way. And let me tell you, we have a very, very conservative U.S. Supreme Court right now. We have some phenomenal justices, but those justices make up the minority, and they will not be able to carry and to fight against the conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court right now. They won't. And the leader of this effort is none other than Justice Clarence Thomas. That's the irony of all ironies to the irony of every irony.
And that was the plan.
That's how I see it, Santita.
Wasn't that the plan?
Right. Absolutely.
But you know what?
That was the plan. That was his...
You know,
let's take it around to other people are thinking about this.
No, I mean, the CK.
Dwight McKee. Because, these are legal issues, but these are moral issues. These are social issues. These are political issues. And so we want to hear from the visionary, Daddy, Uncle Dwight McKee, to give us his perspective on this. Because this is really serious. It's really, really serious.
Well, good morning, everybody. I think that if you take race out the equation, that you can do that, but racism should be a major factor in the decisions that you make. Racism is very quantifiable. You look at with the effect of racism, and you see that it has left us at the bottom of every major part of life, whether it is the lifespan, whether it is the economic issue, whether it is net worth, whether it's disease. Racism has a very quantifiable effect on society. At the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, what the Allies did was sit down and quantify the devastating effect that the war had on the Allied nations. And they forced Germany to pay real money based on the net impact that their policies had on decimating, the world order. Racism is quantifiable that same kind of way, and it can be factored into, I would think, any points of admission or contract or repatriation. It's just like there is a positive point system that grows out of white privilege, where your scores and your income and your parentage, all those go into a very positive point system that you're rewarded for. There should be a equal but adequate analysis that goes into all of the negativity that racism has imposed upon us. That should also be factored in, so that if there's a negative income, that should be factored. If your parents were red line that should be factored. All of those factors that racism generated that put us behind the 8 ball in such a way that the net income, the net worth of a white family is 100 times more lucrative than that of a black family. Those things should be factored, and the colleges and the government should be made to pay for that. Because they were involved in that. They helped make that happen.
And I think if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. If you came to the United States to benefit from the bounty of the United States, it was it's stolen land and unpaid labor, not free labor. Legal Q&A with CK talking about affirmative action and what it means. It could be ended, everybody. It could be gutted. That's right. And the person leading the charge would be none other than Clarence Thomas. It is the Thomas Court. Back with more. The Santita Jackson Show, July 15th through the 19th. We'll be talking about this and so many other issues at the Rainbow Push International Conference. Back in just a minute. Okay, CK, you see who else you have on the panel?
Yes.
Okay,
and
so
we're going to
you
go
wanna
to
do one?
Melody next.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do Melody next, and then Aaron, if you would be available, and then Mark.
Great.
In that order. And is Dr. David Gibbs still on?
No, he's gone.
He's on. Okay. So then Melanie, Aaron, and then Mark.
And it's Melody.
Melody. Did I say Melanie? I'm sorry, Melody.
Look.
Melody. Okay.
You and I have these names, CK, where we have to correct people all the time, so she gets it. She gets it. Oh, my word.
I know, but as someone who is called a lot of different things, my real name is Tricia, and people call me Drusilla, Priscilla, and all these types of things. I try to be sensitive to names because people butcher my name every day.
Every single day. Everybody, please don't talk all at once. How's everybody doing today? Are you all right? Is everybody there?
I'm driving, so I'm trying not to get backwind. Well, I'm not personally driving. My daughter is driving. I am a passenger in her vehicle. We're on the way back from school. I told you yesterday I was picking up my baby at Cornell.
Hey.
And so it's really funny that we're actually talking about affirmative action, and I just picked up my kid from an Ivy League school.
Right.
Oh,
the
boy.
irony in that, right?
No, I mean, look, please. That's been part of the fight to get him in there. And then, get out of here. And it was so funny. One of my classmates in high school, boy, I'll never forget this. And he was from a wealthy white family here in Chicago. Wonderful guy. After freshman year, it was about 10 or 20 of us who ended up taking all of our classes together. So he and I had a lot of close interaction. So after, I guess, the third week in May, people wanted to know, okay, what colleges did you get into? And I got into, all of my first 4, number 1 choices. And he didn't get into Yale, which is where he wanted to go. He got into Williams, which is a great school. And he just looked at me and dismissively, he said, oh, Harvard, Yale, yeah, well, you got in. You're an affirmative action kid. I said, which affirms that I'm qualified to be there. I said, because my parents are not legacies. Oh, honey, I was ready for him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, sugar, what? Am I supposed to feel bad about this?
Well, Santita, when I was at Smith first semester, a young woman she's from Alabama, I think her father was a U.S. Senator, came up to me. I'd gotten the highest grade in the class. And we had these racial awareness seminars. She came up to me and said, I'm just so touched to see, I had no exposure to
back in a minute.
Other than she actually said, mammy.
All right.
And I just didn't know black people could perform so well academically. She thought she was saying something in terms of complimenting me. And that was 1980. Because I just thought all of y'all were here on scholarship and everything I've just done. And this is before anonymous grading and everything, where professors would just hand you oh, this is the top grade in the class. And she just couldn't, it was too much for her to bear. And so she thought, as part of the racial awareness, that said, we should talk about issues. This was her way of talking about issues, purging her soul about how she didn't think black people were smart enough
30 seconds.
to perform so well. She just didn't have exposure. And that was an actual conversation.
I believe it.
1980 was not so long ago.
It really wasn't. I think the intern class at BU, 69% of them didn't know who Dr. King was in 1980. Dr. King had not been dead 20 years.
Well,
Stand by.
Stand by, everybody. We're coming up. Hey, everybody.
Who writes those histories?
Stand by.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Legal Q&A with CK. CK Hoffler. You got a tremendous panel who can weigh in on on this affirmative action question. And you're right, it will be chaos. But you know what? This has been, and I think it was Kathy, you asked me if I had seen the Frontline PBS piece on Clarence and Virginia Thomas. I did, and it was a fantastic piece. I sent the link to my parents because I said, you all got to see this. Because you saw CK before we get to our panel, just the depth of his antipathy. But he hates affirmative action, and yes, everyone who's not watching me, my lips are curled up. He hates it because he feels that people doubt his abilities. And I'm like, my friend, you do not have an understanding of what affirmative action means. You ought to be upset about legacies. I'm not mad at anybody. You get in where you fit in, but don't play with me. Affirmative action, the first thing you've got to be is qualified. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, take it away.
Well, Santita, this discussion is so spirited. I'd love to hear from Melody. Melody, what do you say about all this issue of affirmative action and the fact that it could be gutted by this U.S. Supreme Court?
Good morning. Yeah, this is it's a very, I don't want to even say it's an interesting topic. I think this topic of affirmative action, I think is really atrocious. I think, people from these marginalized communities, the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, affirmative action, it seeks equitable representation for people from all types of categories. And like you guys were saying earlier, the biggest winner of affirmative action is white women, right? Because it includes gender, and it also includes disability. I'm a mom of a special needs child. I have 2 of them. So when we talk about affirmative action, we talk about what else are we taking away from the diaspora of this country. Because there are so many people in this country that have been disenfranchised for one reason or another, whether it's gender or race or disability, that don't have seats at the table. And I talked about that a little bit in my speeches. We're looking for equitable, places to be. And I think when we discount affirmative action as saying you're only in there because you're Native or you're Black or, you have a disability or you're a woman, I think it discounts how qualified that pool is. But what I think affirmative action does is reaches into those disenfranchised communities and allows for space to be held. And so that we can, uplift those folks who may not have had that opportunity. I believe that that's where it comes from. And to be perfectly fair, in one word that I can sum up with Clarence Thomas running this nonsense, and that's what I'm going to call it, it's gross. It's just absolutely gross that a person of color who has benefited from affirmative action because of his qualifications, who now sits in the highest seat of the biggest court in this country, says that it's not qualified because I feel that I wouldn't be held, to account, that I'm less than. I think that's a personal issue, and I think he needs to look deep within himself. But you can't do that to everybody else that has worked so hard to get there, because we can't talk about a blended melting pot of this country if we're going to keep shutting down all of those that did not create this country originally. It's a white settler colonialistic, point of view. It's when we talk about what's in those history books, it's pre-settler colonialism that's in those history books. not written by black folks. It's not written by Native folks. We don't talk about all those harms, right? We don't talk about, the Chinese Railroad. We don't talk about, slavery the way that we should be talking about slavery. Let's be down and dirty and honest. Let's talk about the genocide of Native folks and why, there are no treaties that anybody ever truly upheld. And we're not teaching that. And I think that in itself is a disservice to the affirmative action and why affirmative action is genuinely so important. When we talk about those seats at the table, you can't get them without proper education. You can't get them without affirmative action. And even still, most of those spaces, only 5% of top companies, Fortune 500 companies, are led by people of color. And so affirmative action, I think it needs to be exactly where it is, and I think, we need to be fighting for affirmative action. It reminds me of, there's a few other cases that are in the Supreme Court that, are, before the court right now. One is a Lacta Flambeau case. The other one is, Holland versus Brackeen. And really what those are, they're not about the real issues. These cases aren't really about the issues. It's about chipping away at tribal sovereignty and what that means for tribal people. But affirmative action is also what chips away at people of color. It's a white supremacist thought that if I can go back into this conservative court and now take away all those rights and chip them away one case at a time, you break apart everything that we have all put together, that we have all collectively worked for that future for our children. And if you take that away, what are we leaving for our children?
Well, Melody Cerna. Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago. Join our team any day, every day, all the time. Down and dirty analysis. Love it, Santita.
I know.
And so Aaron Connolly, I love it. Aaron Connolly, what say you?
Good morning, everyone. Well, I think this is part of a bigger conversation and a bigger attack on, education and access, right? The elites are clearly terrified with the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, with these attacks on affirmative action, the attack on President Biden's student loan forgiveness, which, overwhelmingly impacts women and people of color who take out higher loans than anyone, seeking access to this next level, this higher education, right? And when we look at higher education, like every institution in the world, and including the United States, it's been dominated by white males. I mean, up until the 70s, really, there was not elite institutions that had full access for women and people of color, right? There were still segregated elite institutions at the university level, and what we've seen is a great equalizer in access to higher education through the state system, through systems where you're able to go 2 years at a community college, where you're able to transfer credits more easily, and all of those systems have been under attack, state by state. And I think that's the important constitutional element of this, right? What we see is a great push of power into the states. And that's what the conservative element, who has frankly taken over this court in many ways, and we see evidence of their influence from Clarence Thomas's private school fees for his grandnephew, and Justice Roberts' partner, spouse, making millions and millions of dollars off placement from these folks to elite law firms, right? These are all folks who want to maintain control of the system. And what this equalization within access from cases like Bakke that allowed diversity to be a value, a core value, that said this makes all of us better, and it's reason enough to move forward. What we're saying now is we're okay. And the reality is we have to be careful. We are not solid in these rights. And when we see these attacks, the Supreme Court has to be careful, and Justice Roberts, it seems, has lost a large part of influence and control over these justices and is at real risk of overplaying their hand on some of these cases that are up. There's some big decisions that will come down, and if the court is already seen as corrupt, as a deteriorating institution, one that can't be counted on, one that Congress is questioning, one that is not answering questions in front of Senate committees, as they have done hundreds of times in the past. They're at real risk of, further delegitimization of our highest court, and that's scary, right? I think even law students, we see feedback from folks saying, is everything I'm learning going to be completely undone? Am I going to have to redo law school? What do we stand for, right? The idea of stare decisis is being dismantled, and the legal principles we've counted on for so long are in danger. And I'm a little nervous about the decisions coming down.
Absolutely. Now, Santita, I think we've got some callers. We have Paul from
we have to get
Seattle.
Mark Fancher.
Mark Fancher. Now, Mark Fancher, one of the most profound legal analytical minds that I've ever heard. Mark, what do you say about this?
Well, I think it's really helpful for us to place this in some historical context. It's hard to believe now, but there was a time when the word reparations wasn't something that frightened white people to death. Even Lyndon Johnson thought in those terms if he didn't use those words. And the concept of affirmative action was originally imagined as a reparations remedy. There was an acknowledgement of the fact that there were historical circumstances that placed people of color at a disadvantage. And in order to put them on an equal footing with other people, it was necessary to take, as the name suggests, affirmative steps toward equalizing the playing field, leveling the playing field for them. And this was done especially in the field of higher education. In the late 1970s, a white man named Alan Bakke decided that he wanted to challenge the use of affirmative action specifically as a reparations remedy. And his case, Bakke versus University of California, came before the court in 1978. And what the court did with that demonstrates a number of things. One, and foremost in my mind, is the power of white male privilege. Because when the University of California went before the court and said, look at the historical circumstances of people of color. We need to do something in order to level the playing field. The response of these white men on the court, except for Thurgood Marshall, was that makes us uncomfortable. The idea of giving special advantage to people of color or doing anything that will in any way improve their condition bothers us a great deal. And because of that, they went to extraordinary lengths to create jurisprudence that made them feel comfortable. I mean, is there anything that speaks more profoundly to the idea of white privilege, white male privilege and power than that you use the instrument of the state, the instrument of the court, the institution of the court to make you feel comfortable? And what made them feel comfortable is to say that affirmative action is acceptable, but only for purposes of ensuring diversity in the classroom, so that there is an opportunity, and they didn't say this, but in their minds, an opportunity for white kids to be able to have an exchange with people different from themselves and to somehow benefit from that learning experience. So that's what made them feel comfortable. And that's what we've been stuck with since 1978. That is the formulation of affirmative action. That's what's necessary in order for an affirmative action program to survive. Even this was challenged when cases were brought in the, just not that long ago, against the University of Michigan. And when it came before the court, everybody panicked, much as people are panicking now. And they said, affirmative action is dead. We've got a conservative court. There's no way that it's going to survive this. But it did survive. And I told people it was going to survive. And the reason that I thought it would survive is because as soon as the case was filed, friend of the court briefs came flooding into the court from the military-industrial complex from the U.S. military and from major corporations who acknowledged, quite frankly, that in order for them to do what they do, they needed to have people of color in their ranks. And the only way that they could have people of color in the military in its highest ranks and people in major corporations is for affirmative action to be in place to ensure a free-flowing pipeline of candidates into their institutions. And, they didn't say this, but it makes sense, because when these major corporations go into the global south, into countries that are south of the equator, that are populated by brown and black people, and they're trying to work deals, they're trying to negotiate deals to get the resources in these countries, they can't send a silver-haired, white, middle-aged man in to negotiate these deals with these people. They need people that look like these people. And where are they going to get them? They're going to get them from universities that have affirmative action. So it was important for them. And it was important for the military to have people like Colin Powell who are directing these operations that are intended to lock down and exploit the resources of the Southern Hemisphere, so that people couldn't say it's racist, so that they couldn't point and say it's the great white man from the North who's coming down to steal the resources of the underdeveloped world. So we have to take all of that into account, and that is the reality of what we're facing now. And what the court is going to be confronted with is that question of whether the Equal Protection Clause sustains and supports the formulation of affirmative action as it exists now. And if it's demonstrated to the satisfaction of the court that it survives what they call strict scrutiny, which means that when you're trying to divide groups based on what's a suspect category, in this case race, then the government has to have a compelling reason for doing it and a compelling governmental interest in it, and whatever they do has to be narrowly tailored. And thus far, the compelling interest has been diversity in education, and they've narrowed and they've whittled away at the way in which affirmative action is to be implemented. And the challenge for those who are trying to protect affirmative action is to demonstrate that concept has continuing viability. I am a little less comfortable now that it will survive, because you've got a rogue court or rogue members of the court who are willing to do just about anything. But what I am comfortable about is that even if the court strikes down affirmative action, the military-industrial complex will once again find a way to ensure that they have an open pipeline and open access to people of color. The problem is that whatever they come up with will be designed specifically for that purpose, and for crazy radical people like me, those kinds of students might not have a chance.
CK, we have got some callers. Let's get to Paul from Seattle. Paul, what's on your mind?
Oh, good morning, everyone. It's just really sad that we need to deal with Clarence Thomas and his wife, not only with regard to their personal political leanings having an effect on the court, but apparently Clarence Thomas and his personal issues and his reaction formation against affirmative action, because he may think that it reflects poorly on him and his abilities. And as I understand it, though, he was a beneficiary of affirmative action. But, you look at how extreme he is. Another case in the University of Michigan Law School case, Grader v. Bollinger in 2002, Clarence Thomas said, affirmative action, and he's been against all of them. Fisher, University of Texas, he's been against all of them. But he said, affirmative action is not only not needed, it's harmful. Mm-hmm. But wait a minute, that case was not about a person of color being denied entry to the University of Michigan Law School. It was about a white girl being denied. And she wasn't denied admission. So if she wasn't denied admission, they simply said, we have enough white girls from Saline, Michigan with a 3.9 grade point average who were candy stripers. I mean, how many of them do we need? And so he's arguing that it wasn't about a person of color getting affirmative action in that case. It was about a white. The law school said we have enough white girls. Right now, do we not have a right to have? And the court upheld the affirmative action policies of the U of M Law School in that case. but Clarence Thomas did not. And it's just really a shame that we have to deal with not only his blatant and obvious political biases and his wife, but his personal issues too. This is a self-loathing black man. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize, but that's why he was chosen, Paul. They were not going to choose someone because, see, he can be managed. Someone who feels good about themselves can't be managed, right? I mean, we see that in the admissions process at these schools. You know, they don't want. There's a reason that our freedom fighters have come from HBCUs. They have not a one has come out of Harvard. W.E.B. Du Bois came out of Fisk and went to Harvard. Let's be clear on that. That's not. They don't teach freedom up there. I said it. Mic drop on that. C.K. Hoffler, come on, boom.
Boom. Is Dynamo Dave still holding?
The sunshine of my life.
Holding on the line.
Dynamo.
Oh, how's the sunshine of Chicago doing?
You're the sunshine of my life. I only have 1 minute for you, though, my sweet. You got the mic, though. Go on and go for it.
Yeah, so I think the whole affirmative action, I mean, you could say the nation is burning, and like a building burning, and there's some people who are going to get out of that building, but their life depends on it, but they won't help other people out. And Clarence Thomas is like a person getting out of a burning building and then not, helping others to get out. So it's kind of an act of heroism for people to support affirmative action, and there's nothing for them to gain other than concern for other people's lives. Now, it's really boils down to what do we value as American citizens? Do we value competition or cooperation? And I hope it's cooperation. Our nation was founded on cooperation, barn raisins, and all the rest. And I hope the Supreme Court is wise enough to rule on the value of cooperation versus competition. Thank you.
No, thank you, CK. Have a couple minutes, and everyone, I want you to stay on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're going to extend this conversation so we can get proper closing thoughts from all the members of our panel. But CK, what do you see? This will impact every area of American life. I think that Attorney Fancher has a point. Absolutely. But just the fact that you have a Supreme Court that would do this, because this is what they did with the Voting Rights Act. Because, getting us to go to work, because that's what we were brought here to do, that's okay. But not voting, not so much. CK, 2 minutes.
Well, I think, the sad thing, Santita, we're going to see a further erosion of voting rights, because then those states especially who are engaged in extraordinary voter suppressive measures, will feel emboldened to do more. But I think the message here is we've got to keep our eye on this. There are things that we can do as citizens. There are letters that we can send. There are messages that we can send to our members of Congress. There are letters that we can send to the U.S. Supreme Court. How about that? There are advocacy groups who are fighting the fight to preserve affirmative action. We need to lend us their support. This is a huge issue, and the most important thing is for us to keep our eye on it, see how it evolves and develops, and to not just accept what this U.S. Supreme Court could be about to do. I'm concerned. I think Mark Fancher raised so many great issues, the military complex, but my goodness, this court is scary. It's very scary. So we have to keep our eye on the prize. And we've had a great panel. I hope we continue this discussion, Santita.
We are, just because we want to get closing thoughts from Melody and from Mark and from Dwight and Aaron and you before you catch this plane. I mean, because the fact is, I'm not scared. In fact, I'm excited because I think in these moments, that is when we begin to fight. And that's a good thing. I hope you will be at our Rainbow Push International Conference, July 15th through the 19th. It's going to be exciting. We're going to be talking about issues just like these. It was in slavery that we got free. It's in the worst of times, in the darkest of times, that we've seen the light. So there's an opportunity here for us. So come on, everybody, get busy. It's time to go. It's time to get to work. All of these privileges that you enjoy were not, Barack Obama didn't just walk up and run for president. Somebody had to pay the price for that. We didn't just walk into freedom. Somebody had to pay the price for that.
Absolutely.
Frederick Douglass had to escape slavery, y'all. He didn't just end up at the White House. No, there was a long road to the White House. So we have to understand, as my mother says, there's a difference between a miracle and a blessing. The blessing is a Barack Obama. It is, yes, even a Daniel Cameron down in Kentucky and a Tim Scott in South Carolina. These are blessings because you know, we opened the door for them. But the miracle was Dr. King. The miracle was Jesse Jackson. Those are the miracles. Yes. The people, the way makers for you, the Sojourner Truths, the Harriet Tubmans. You need to be clear on that too. Some people benefited from the struggle. Some people were soldiers in it. Now it's our generation's opportunity to be soldiers in this struggle. The struggle continues. But what's CK?
Victory is certain. A luta continua, victoria es certa.
All right now, but you got to keep on
Victory
struggling.
is certain.
Thank you, Henry, for a great show. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends so we can get some closing thoughts or more thoughts. Yeah. Some more thoughts from this wonderful panel. See you, everybody. Love you. Have a great day. You know, I mean, Mark brings up some great points, and Dwight does too, about race and racism. And Melody, you bring up some great points. Just, I mean, it's Aaron. Everybody's bringing up some great points. I mean, we act as if all of these moves forward hurt somebody. They helped America.
And Santita, thank you for this. I have to run right now.
Okay, of course.
But everybody can hear closing thoughts. So I will give you a call a little bit later. And thank you to our magnificent panelists for all of your thoughts. And I hope that we continue this discussion, Santita, on another show.
Look, we will.
Keep the dialogue going.
Because, you know, the case is about to come before us. How about that? I mean, absolutely. Melody, where do we go from here? I mean, and in particular, because I don't think we hear enough of indigenous voices. Dwight McKee was so impressed with you when he saw you at the inauguration, just so that you know, you got a fan guy over here. Just like you were the fangirl for Kevin yesterday. Well, he's your fan guy. And he said, boy, she was profound. And I'm so glad you had her on the show yesterday. So Dwight McKee, Melody Cerna, Dwight McKee, and Aaron Connolly. Well, we all love Aaron, and Mark Fancher, attorney Mark Fancher. We all love them. But we don't hear enough, I think, about indigenous people in this. Because I think also because the only people who cannot pass into whiteness, quite frankly, are black people. So we kind of almost own that space. But for those of you who accept the challenge, I would say, of identifying and living in indigenous communities, it's a lot. I remember years ago reading about Paul Newman, who said that he opted to be Jewish, and it was a People magazine article. I thought that was very interesting. I was a child when I read it, but I paid close attention to it. He said, his interviewer asked him, why do you choose that? He said, because it's more of a challenge, and challenges make you a better person. When you got to struggle. And I thought that was very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And I didn't know what all of that meant when I was about 8 or 9 when I read it, Melody. But, where do you see the indigenous community fitting in this struggle, in this discussion about affirmative action? Because we don't hear about you trying to get the numbers and all those things. And I know you need representation. Melody? Is she still there? Oh, she might be gone. Wow, we're going to have to get her back. Well, Dwight McKee, your thoughts? Is everybody gone? Oh, Henry. Oh, my goodness. Well, you know what? I was trying to give everybody closing thoughts, and I think that they are still there. But let me find out where Henry is, because he might need to push a button to bring everybody up. So just give me a hot second. Okay. I don't know, but they all might be gone. So we'll see. Just hold on one second. Stay right there, everybody. Henry, yes, could you check and see if my guests are still there? Okay. Please let me know. Thank you, because I'm speaking to them and I'm not hearing anything back. Okay, can you all hear me? Or can you respond?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sorry he had to flick a switch. So is Melody, are you still there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, well, talk to me. I mean, where do the indigenous fit in this conversation? I mean, because I think it's a conversation for everybody. But I think you have a very interesting perspective since, Mark reminds us all the time, Mark, I got to get to you. We're sitting on your land. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Yeah,
Stay right there, Melody. Mark, because you always put that first in these discussions. Why? Is Mark still there? Oh, wow. I wish you were here to explain it, but I certainly want you're gonna meet him again. But Melody, talk to me. I mean,
I think, for, the indigenous community, I think it's really important for people to even recognize that Native Americans weren't even citizens, until 1924.
Say that one more time.
When we talk about the vote, I said Native Americans did not even become U.S. citizens until 1924. That was after the First World War, where they literally gave their lives and their language and their spirit to win a war. They still, after that successful winning of a war, and I don't know if there's a such thing as a successful win in a war, but the fact that they gave their lives and their bodies, they still weren't even considered citizens. Their voting rights, we talk about disenfranchisement, their voting rights weren't even truly established until, closer to the 70s. Their sovereignty rights weren't even recognized until the 70s. So this continuous genocidal acts of our government, perpetuating violence, on our communities of color, and they do it through laws. And I think affirmative action for us moving forward is fighting for that, because fighting for affirmative action isn't just fighting for Black folks. It isn't just fighting for Native folks. It isn't just fighting for Latino folks. It is fighting for all of those spaces of disenfranchisement. But I think in moving forward, when we talk about these bridges of healing, let's be very, very real. White men in this country are very scared that the population is shifting. And because it's shifting and we're coming into ourselves and we're coming into our power and we're coming into our truth and we're coming into that blood memory, that DNA, right, that our ancestors have literally put into us. When you go back, we remember. If you really, really believe in blood memory of your DNA and of your ancestors, you feel those traumas. You can re-feel those. It may be 2023, but I can feel it from 1780 and from, 1865 and from all of those times where we didn't have rights. They were just this place where we didn't have it. And I thought it was really interesting. He was talking about in 1978 how affirmative action came into place. Well, in 1978 was the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. It protected the rights for Natives to be able to exercise our religions, right? And it's not even our religion. It was just our culture, but they had to call it a religion just so that we could practice our culture openly, that we were allowed access to sites and, possessions of our sacred items, and to be able to, have ceremony in a public way that we weren't even allowed to have until 1978. And when we really think about that, we're not a reinvigorated people. We've always been here. I think that's why honoring the land and honoring that atrocity of how we all got here, right? Some of us were here, but some of us were brought here. And some of us came because of a brighter future. Some of us, came for all these other different reasons. And then we were disenfranchised by those same colonialists that thought they knew what was better for us. And they taught us how to be. And so I think in moving forward, we need to be mindful and very cognizant of what our blood DNA says of who we are and allow us to be that. And affirmative action somewhat protects that by allowing us to have those spaces again. It allows us to say, yes, as a woman, I could do that. As a person of color, I can do that. As a person with a disability, I can do that. But yes, I think white women right now need to be cheering for affirmative action because they're holding those spaces that Black women can't have, that Native women don't have. And it's not that we're not smarter. We didn't have those opportunities. You talked about legacy earlier. Like I said, I'm going to brag a little bit for just a hot second. My daughter just finished her freshman year at Cornell University yesterday. We're driving home today. And to be perfectly honest, she was at a charter school. She went to Pritzker College Prep. It's a charter school here in Chicago. And You know, she graduated in the top 10% of her class. She was a triple sport athlete. You know, she's the president of our youth council. You know, she represents over 100 youth councils in 7 states in the Midwest on a national level. You know, she worked her tail off to get
What
where
is
she
her
is.
name?
Nobody handed that to her. Angelina Serna.
We are proud, and we know we have to claim Angelina as our god baby. So I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to get at is that when she sat in that school and she was applying to all these schools, she applied to 21 schools and got into 15, 4 of them on full rides, and it wasn't because she's a legacy. Because I'm gonna drop some real facts. I chose to not finish college because I was a single mother, and I needed to work in order to you know, provide for my children. We've lived in nothing but black and brown neighborhoods our whole lives. My children know the struggle, and they are humbled by it because it's what makes them strong and resilient. And I think that's what comes from our people when you live in community. And I mentioned this yesterday about how Natives don't have a community to call themselves. But what they did have in that community was other people of color that said, I'm going to uplift you. I'm going to put you there. I'm going to help you. I'm going to guide you. I'm going to do all of these things. And we have these beautiful children of color that are sitting on this precipice right now that if we take this away from them, we will continuously shift where we go as a country. And if we allow white supremacy to continue, and let's be very real and call it what it is, it's white supremacy at its finest. It's self-loathing, like they were saying, you know, at its finest. And we need to fight for our affirmative action so that we can continue to have these seats at the table to truly shape this progressive country that we actually all live in. And we can't do that by ourselves. We genuinely have to do that together.
Dwight McKee, what do you think about having your own community? And Aaron? Dwight?
Well, let me go here for a minute. The biggest affirmative action program they've ever had in this country was Lincoln's Homestead Act, where he gave 140 acres to 300,000 white men in 1862. 140 acres to 300,000 white men, many who were European, which is how they got their bearings. And it was somebody else's land that they gave away. It was the natives' land that Lincoln decided was unworthy for them to have, that he, by proclamation, gave to any other white person who would claim that land and farm that land. You're talking about affirmative action. That's real affirmative action. And so when we talk about the absence of the community, a community for the natives, is not because it was always that way, because they always had community. They were tribal people, and hundreds and thousands of tribes all over this nation. But their land was given away, and their communities were decimated. And so many of them were left unless they're on a reservation. Many of them don't have communities because their communities were taken by Europeans. So that's a great, 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 great debt that we owe the natives. When you really think about it, the Supreme Court itself is illegitimate because they are governing and giving laws to a land that really does not belong to them. The real Supreme Court should be a court of tribal natives who come together and make decisions on how the land should be governed and how the land should be managed. But in lieu of that, because we, are under occupation and they're under occupation, at least the Supreme Court can be fair enough and authentic enough to put in perspective the fact that they are the benefactors of historic exploitation of people, many of them's ancestors, children and grandchildren are still here. that should at least be able to benefit off the spoils of a land that was stolen from them. As us, who put free labor in our ancestors to build the land and develop the land, at least we should be given the benefits and the prerogatives of those things which have come from our labor that white men benefit from all over the country. White men are the greatest benefactors of affirmative action than anybody in history, because they benefited by other people's land and other people's labor, and it has made them rich and powerful.
Aaron? Aaron? Is Aaron there, or is Mark still there? Well, I mean, look, mic drop on what you both said, because that really is it. And I think that, I think the way that we grow is by having conversations just like these, everybody. We need to have these conversations. We need to have these, because, what do you say to people, Melody, when they say, well, my family didn't take your people's land from you. So I just came here. I've just been here a generation or two. What is your response? And then what is your response to white Melody? Because my thing is, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You came in on the theft, and you benefited from it. So there's that. So you owe.
Well, I think it's graceful ignorance, right? To be perfectly honest, I think we call it graceful ignorance. If you're only one generation or two generations, or even three generations in, it's graceful ignorance. You knew where you were coming. And if you didn't know the history of this country before you stepped foot into this country, that's your graceful ignorance. And I'm going to allow you that because the Creator tells me that I need to forgive those that may not know. But once they know, you can't unknow what I tell you. And so I think, like you said, in for a penny and for a pound. I don't tell people, you're right, your family didn't do that, because I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, but you knew what you were coming to, because this country was built on that affirmative action, on that taking, on that genocide, on that slavery, on the backs of the labor of others. You knew what that was when you got here. So don't pretend now that everything that you have came for free, because it didn't come for free. It came at a cost of generations, of hundreds of years of harm, trauma, and pain, and genocide, and violence. That's what this country was built on. It was a beautiful country in our way, right? In an Aboriginal way, in an indigenous way, in our values. That's what it was. But nobody even knew what that was. They came here and thought they wanted to change it. One day a year, the United States Senate reads how they got their Constitution. Their Constitution came from the Haudenosaunee people. I am from the Turtle Mountain Band, the Chippewa Indians, and the Oneida Nation. I belong to the Iroquois Confederacy, was what it was called. We're called the Six Nations now, also known as the Haudenosaunee people. Our wampum belt, our ways of life, we designed that Constitution that the white man then decided to turn around and use against us while they took our land, laughing in our face and killing our people. So when people say, I didn't know, yeah, you did, because it's all over the white colonialistic history books about what happened here. So yes, you did know. You just chose to not be cognizant. You chose to be ignorant and say, well, it wasn't me. And that can only go so far. And again, I call it graceful ignorance because I don't want to be mean, because I'm not ever trying to be harmful, but I am trying to be real on what that really looks like for communities when you say, well, you can't blame me. I don't blame anyone. I can blame colonialism as a whole, but I can't blame any one person. But what I can do now is fight for my rights and show our children and our youth of all of our disenfranchised communities how to fight for their rights moving forward. But do that in truth and honesty. Don't do that in despair. Don't do that in, whataboutism. Don't do that, because you're not giving anyone a service when we don't tell the truth. And I think there's truth in healing, and I think the only way to heal is by really honoring and respecting that truth about what we are and where we are and how we got here.
Dwight McKee?
Not only did they know what they were getting into when they came here, that's what brought them here. The reason most Europeans came here is because they couldn't own property in Europe. And they found a place where they can come and literally extract the property of other people by military means. That is exactly why they came here, looking for their piece of the rock, knowing that it wasn't their rock. It was somebody else's rock that with enough bullets and guns they could take a piece of. And so not only did they know why they were coming, that's what brought them here, was the opportunity to do that. So you call it graceful ignorance, I call it disgraceful ignorance, because they knew exactly what they were doing when they came. And now they act as if when you raise a question about it is, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. What are you talking about? When you say, hey, remember me, I'm the same person that when you were starving to death, I taught you how to make corn and gave you turkey to feed you. You turned it into a holiday for yourself, but never, never, never brought me into the equation, never compensated me for saving your life and feeding you from my land. And now you act as if God gave you the right to exploit me. No, that's disgraceful ignorance to me.
Melody? I think you got some allies here, my sister. And, because we just need to make it right,
thank
okay?
you.
And tell the truth. That's why I said, and Dwight was absolutely supportive of this because he was so impressed when he saw you on Monday. He said, we need her voice. And that was the first thing I said to you. I said, no, you were like, I've been looking for you. I'm like, honey, I'm looking for you. You need to come on the show and lift up your voice. And for those who have taken umbrage with who you are, where you are, whatever, it doesn't even matter. Your voice, you're speaking for some people, and you're speaking to some people. And when you talk about the historical pain, the blood pain, the blood stain, blood is the only substance in the world that doesn't degrade. You can't wipe it. You can wash it down. You can do whatever you want to do. And the floor or whatever, wherever it was splattered, it will look clean. But guess what? The blood never loses its power. Oh, hallelujah. It never loses. Right. You can't remove blood. You cannot do it. That's why they bring these special chemicals and whatnot. You can't remove blood. You can never do it. And it's all over the place here. Now, blood has redemptive power. Now, we don't have to, as you have said, Melody, we don't have to honor all the pain. You honor those who were hurt. But you don't make pain a religion. Don't do that. I mean, enough. At some point, you got to move forward, kids, because everybody has been slighted. Everybody been hurt. Everybody has been the N-word. Everybody. You keep on living. Everybody. Everybody can sing the blues. And all of us.
And I think that's a part of the grace, right?
Yeah.
Santita, I think, in just allowing me some of that space, I think that's part of the grace, right? We all learn. We've come through these places where, we went from one form of music to the next form of music. We use this jargon and that jargon. But I think when we just get down to it, as we get older, as we really go back to that blood memory, I think as we come into our own, I think there is place for grace, right? Mm-hmm. And when I say that, especially for our communities of color, that space of grace comes from, I think we've always tried to just fit in, right? How do we fit in? How do we get to be in fellowship, right, in all these different spaces? So whether that was through religion, that was through music, that was through, activism, whether that was through all of those things, we have all said or done things that we may be ashamed of, or maybe not even know that we were ashamed of, but we realize that, maybe that was harmful now. Yeah. Looking back, that may be harmful when I did that then, but I'm a better person now. And maybe that's that grace that we say, but what is the work we're trying to do now?
That's right.
What is that today? And how do we move that forward? How do we build those bridges? How do we create that healing? Because we can sit in this misery of the oppression that we've all been in, or we could talk about how we can collectively get together and heal and move forward with a little bit of grace and a whole lot of accountability. because that's the other thing. That's the other side of grace, is accountability. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge I may have caused harm. I apologize for the harm I may have caused, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but I am affirming that I will no longer cause harm, and I will do everything in my power to heal and share that healing with others. And that's that accountability piece. That's the piece where, if we're going to give grace, we got to hold accountability to that grace as well.
Amen to that. Dwight, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, God bless you, sister.
We got a lot of work to do, everybody. A lot. A whole lot of work to do, and we can do it. And the good thing is we're going to have to do it together. Because, I remember watching the movie Glory, and you saw Denzel Washington and Denzel Washington's character and, oh goodness, Sarah Jessica Parker's husband. They were both excellent in the movie. But, he was the he was the white head of this black company, and the most rebellious, recalcitrant person in the company was also the strongest, the black guy, who was the most resentful. But they, on a soul level, knew each other because they were brothers, really. And at the end of the day, not literal brothers, so in America that could be true, but just soul brothers. And at the end of the day, the white general said, look, not general, but he was the head of the troop. He said, look, I'm going to need you to help get everybody in line. We're not going to be able to advance. We're not going to be able to win without you. Everybody's looking to you. And he said, you know what? I guess it's time for all of us to ante up and step up to the plate and be men. Because ain't nobody clean. I'll never forget that. And that kind of hit me funny in 1989. I was a kid then. But ain't nobody clean. I get it now. Ain't nobody clean. Everybody's had some pain. You look around the whole world, genocide ain't unique. It's something that human beings do to each other, and it's wrong. But what you have to do is acknowledge it. In all of your ways, acknowledge God. And God is truth. And it's not my truth, your truth. Truth is neutral. Truth is just truth. It's either truth or it's a lie. Acknowledge where you've hurt people. Acknowledge where you've damaged people. You and I were talking about this. Melody, we're from damaged people. We're not damaged goods. We've been hurt. Who puts smallpox in a blanket and gives it to people? Who kills off people's livestock? Who does that? Acknowledge it. How do you take someone's land from them and you keep the name and keep on rolling? Are you for real? No. You got to say sorry, and I'm sorry. As a descendant of people who were enslaved, I got some of you and me too. But I'm a black woman. I put you in front of me because I'm sitting on your land, Melody. And I'm glad that you are broad and mature enough to acknowledge me. And the only way we are going to move forward is if we acknowledge each other and move and help each other to get up this ladder. That's the way it's going to work.
That's right.
The only way it's going to work.
And I will tell you, my new sister, I am in for this work and this fight and this allyship and, and these uplifted voices. I'm here. I'm here to do the work with you. Once I'm home and I'm at this car, there's lunches ahead, there's meetings ahead, there's work ahead, there's voices ahead, and I look forward to that.
But wait
that's
a minute.
The hope and the prosperity of how you heal through the trauma.
Because
you look forward to what we can do.
Speaking of which, Dwight, are you still there?
Yeah.
On Friday, we're going to be talking about, just in case, unless the skies fall, we're going to be talking about several cases. And really, I want her to dig down into what happened in these Catholic boarding schools, where we saw in each one, we've seen tens of thousands of these Native children who have been dug up, who were killed. And she's going to tell us what happened to these kids, because the evidence is there, Dwight. Because we started talking about Emmett Till. I said, if you think that this boy was not sexually violated, you're out of your mind. It's something we don't even want to talk about, Dwight, Melody. Like, no, I just saw his head. No, sugar. He was accused of sexually abusing a white woman. You think these white men did not take him on sexually? I know it sounds horrible, and it ought to sound horrible. It ought to keep you fired up. Because the woman who fingered him was able to die in disgrace, but in quiet and peace. I don't know if she died in peace, but she did die. She didn't go to jail. The state of Mississippi held her indictment papers in the bottom of a courthouse, and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill held her confession, protecting her. She had all of the great institutions of this country protecting her. And yes, I'm going to say, and the Catholic Church has protected these schools. We don't even know how many babies have been killed who were taken from their parents to make them white. Are you serious? Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Governmental policies. They were paying people to kill natives because it sued their agenda. So, there are so many things. And, like I said, I could talk about history all day long. It's not that hard to find if you really want to know the truth. I think we shy away from the truth because they're uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to talk about that you come from a place that is ugly and scarred.
That's right.
And, we talk about, we want to lock up this person for this thing. Well, that's how this country was built. Those things have happened because that was a norm in that time because it was about power. Sexual assault is not about a sickness. It's about power.
Absolutely.
Let's be very real. Let's call it what it is. It's about power. No matter who is the perpetrator, it's about power.
Always.
I mean, there is a sickness, obviously, but that's power, right? Money is power. Land is power. All of those things are power-creating things, and those were all the things that didn't build this country. It broke it. It broke it. And all they did was use all that power to put it back into pieces. But they should have known, like all things, the truth will come out. And when it does, it starts to fall apart. And I think the beauty in some of that history is watching the census and watching the people of color reinvigorate themselves, repopulate ourselves. We're coming back to say we're taking back what's ours. And we're doing it decade by decade. But we are going to turn that, and we are going to become this progressive nation that can heal one another through the trauma.
Amen.
And as long as we are okay with having those hard conversations, those ugly, real conversations, and still be mindful and respectful, we can agree to disagree all day long. But I can also respect your opinion if you can respect mine, even though we don't agree. And that's power. That in and of itself is the power.
And you know what? Even if you don't respect my opinion, I'm going to respect you. I have to stay. I'm going to be what I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to become you. I'm not going to do that ugliness.
Well, that's humanity.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's humanity, right? And I don't care what religion you are or how you follow it or what you may call, your God or your higher power. I think there's that fundamental value of humanity. What is humanity? What are those core values of humanity? And one of them is love, and the other one is kindness. And it's been shown for as long as time immemorial that that's how we started. It's not how we ended, but it's how we started. And I think we're in this place where we're all trying to just get back there. And I think as long as we keep having these conversations, we're going to get back there. I have hope and faith because I got children, and I need them to get there, but we're going to get there.
Well, you're right. And with your example, that's the key. That is the key. And I am, like I said to you, I'm here for it.
Mm-hmm.
I am absolutely here for it. So everybody, let's get to work. We got a lot of stuff to do. Dwight McKee, do you want to say anything before we go?
Assalamu
alaikum. Oh, bless your heart. Well, you know what, everybody? It has been wonderful. I have truly, truly enjoyed being with each of you today. What a blessing you have been. Melody, it's been a blessing spending time with you. And I'm so excited that we're going to be doing this work together because we've got a lot to do, got a lot of healing to do. And I think that as long as we are honest and talk about it, we're going to be good. I really do. I believe that. I believe that. I believe that. I believe that. I love you, everybody. Thank you, Kathy. Oh, love y'all, love y'all, love y'all, love you, love you, love you, love you. Thank you, Kenneth. I hope you got something from this. We're going to be talking with Melody again on Friday, and talking with you tomorrow, everybody. Love you, love you, love you so much. You see, the president's had to abbreviate his trip to Asia to get back here and deal with this debt limit crisis. I think it's much bigger, much deeper than people are saying. I mean, yelling is yelling. She's like, look, y'all have already gotten too close to the edge. My June 1st is like the end point. And I'm wondering if we have any money. All this money we've been spending on all these wars, and for what? Yeah, I said it, and for what? You find, the first story I did for you today, you find we are the arms suppliers to the dictators of the world. And we talk about democracy? Come on. Y'all know that's not right. You know that's not right. So I love you, love you, love you. I will see you tomorrow, Lord willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you, everybody. Mwah. God bless you, Melody, my sister Melody, and my brother Dwight. Love you, love you, love you, everybody. See you tomorrow. My morning stars, love you all. We are out of here. Thank you, Henry, for a great show.